build relationships, and advance studies in these areas as well. So we hope you're not studying science and technology, math, and engineering, that you'll be inspired after today's voyage into space. And I do think we have a couple of people here who are already studying these areas, I believe. Bradley, who's in front of us here, Bradley works on Forza Horizon 3, which is a video game that has a lot of science and tech in it. Give a round of applause. We have Rebecca over here, who's going to be a pro cyclist and be famous using math and science while cycling around the world. And then right in the front, we have little Julia, who's going to be a zoologist. Let's go. And last but not least, we have Zara, who's going to save dogs around the world. Thank you guys. Since 2010, we've had the Science Envoy program. The program is about 18 envoys in about 41 countries around the world. And so we're happy to have Charlie Bolden with us to continue this legacy in science and technology. And we hope to consider the American Corner shuttle your home away from home. Here we have coding classes. We advise people on scholarships to study in the United States and study abroad. We also work on some employment opportunities for parents that can have friends who'd like more information on how to set up a resume. We have online classes that are all free and high-speed internet, as well as our makerspace where you can use the equipment to do digital work, maybe produce a video for school and all that great stuff. So it's all here and available to you, so I hope you come back and join us. And now we're going to have our introduction of our panelists. So before we orbit off into space, I'd like you to join me in counting down. Can we count down? All right, here we go. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
As we left off, but every instruments are repeated, and we are on course, we are on track. So, leading the charge, we have Mr. Major General Charles Bolden over here, who led 4 missions in orbit around space. But 2 of those he commanded, and 2 of those he piloted. So he's sort of not experienced in the front end. So we're in good hands here. Aside from that, he also led the National Aeronautical Space Agency, also known as NASA, for 15 years. So I think it was 7 years. It's okay. But it's felt like that. Yeah, it is. And alongside me, we have the Chief Imagination Officer for the United States. And there.
Okay, so we're going to kind of turn a little bit this way so that they can see us and then everyone else over here can see us. But just to introduce ourselves, I'm Steve and I run the Living Maths program, and we are basically a STEM-based enrichment program where we want to make math and science exciting to as many people around the world as possible. And we even have some schools joining us. I know that we have Atalo in Brazil, and I know we've got a couple of schools in the US there. There's Diane and Ellen, and I know we've got a few more that are going to be joining us live, I think one from Greece as well. So we'll see who actually does join us during the hangout. But effectively, space is very exciting. But we don't always get a chance to interact with a real astronaut. And not only a real astronaut, but someone who has led all the astronauts and was in charge of all the rockets, but knows a lot about the missions and knows about where NASA is heading and where space in general is heading. And I think those kind of insights are very useful for us to know. Are we really planning to go to Mars? Are we first going to the moon? Were we ever going to Mars? And then we're going. So we're going to get those kinds of insights, maybe even find out about certain places like area, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to ask a few questions. And now that Charlie is no longer the head of NASA, I think that they've revoked his security clearance, which means he can now speak freely. And we're going to get some insights into everything we've always wanted to know. But before we begin, the first thing I want to know is today is Veterans Day. Before you became an astronaut, you were a fighter pilot.
I was an attack pilot.
What is the difference between a fighter and an attack pilot?
Well, fighter pilots were big watches. And, but seriously, in the Marine Corps and in the Navy, we have 2 types of
jet pilots. We have fighter pilots whose main mission is air-to-air combat, usually protecting the aircraft carrier, protecting bases, protecting bombers, and like Top Gun.
There we go.
And then I was an attack pilot, so my job was to deliver things to a target on the ground. And we generally had, like I flew the A6 Intruder, which had no air-to-air weapons at all. So you were, when it came to air-to-air kind of stuff, you were kind of at the mercy of the elements.
Wow.
So that's the difference.
Okay, but I mean, you obviously served quite a while in the Army. What does Veterans Day mean to you?
Well, Veterans Day is a very special day to anybody who served in the military. And I happen to be a Marine, so I served 34 years on active duty, and I continue to be a Marine today. But today is the observance of Veterans Day. It was actually yesterday, and it is the observance of the end of World War I, and it was designated as a time where we would pay homage to people who had fought and died or served in initially World War I, but now it's been in all the wars. And for us Marines, it's a very special day because it comes right on the heels of our birthday. So on Saturday, we celebrated the 243rd birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Wow. And this is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I yesterday. And we have a lot of banners on the Marine Corps flag at the Marine Corps barracks in Washington, D.C. And each of those banners stands for some battle in which the Marine Corps fought. So one of the most important was the Battle of Bellwood in World War I, where we earned the title Hunden, which is Devil. The Germans.
Okay, guys.
Whoops, somebody else.
I'm just muting them. Okay.
The Germans thought that these crazy people, they fought with such tenacity that they were like devil dogs, and so made stuff. So that is one of the most important battles in the history of.
Now, I know that as a teacher, when our past students perform very well, we like to claim a little bit of responsibility. Like that former student of mine, the one that's now called Elon Musk, you know, I did teach him so do the Marines like to put you in their Hall of Fame as someone that has achieved some greatness?
The Marine Corps takes credit for everybody that we produce. You know, good and bad.
Once you're a Marine, always.
And you're absolutely right. But it's very difficult to become a Marine. And so when someone earns the Eagle Golden Anchor, I like to tell people it's kind of burned in your heart. So you never stop being one.
And that played a huge role in you becoming an astronaut.
It did.
Training and that type of thing.
For the benefit of kids who might want to be astronauts, I never dreamed of being an astronaut. I grew up in a place not unlike South Africa, or the cities of South Africa in the days of apartheid. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, segregated. I was in the South. You know, South Carolina was one of the 13 original colonies, and it was one of the colonies that perpetuated slavery for a long, long time. And so when I went to school, blacks and whites didn't go to school together. As an example, people frequently ask me if I went to the University of South Carolina. I did not, because the University of South Carolina was for whites only when I went there. But I was fortunate. I went to the United States Naval Academy, and it was there that I decided I was going to be a Marine. Although I left high school with two things I knew, absolutely knew. I would not be a Marine because Marines were crazy, and I would definitely not fly airplanes because that was inherently dangerous. So those were the only two things I knew when I graduated.
So that's what you knew, but that's not what happened.
That's not what happened. So again, for the young people here and out there, life is what happens when you make all of your plans and step out. We have a saying in the Marine Corps: no plan survives crossing the line of departure, which means you can plan for a battle, you can plan for anything, and then life happens. And so in my case, I got to the Naval Academy, and I was really intrigued by my first company officer, who happened to be an infantry officer. And I decided, he was like my dad. My dad was tough but incredibly fair. My father was my high school football coach, so everything I am today, I credit him and my mom, who was my middle school librarian. But Major John Riley Love kind of shaped me as a midshipman. When I got ready to graduate, I said, I want to be like him. Which did not make my family happy, because we were, for you all, this is way before you were even born. But we were going through a period in Vietnam called the Tet Offensive, and it was not a very good time, particularly with the Marines. So my family was not happy that I had chosen to do that. And but my wife kept after me and finally convinced me that we should go to Pensacola, Florida, and I should go to flight school. And so even though I said no, my wife said yes. And as most men find out over time,
behind every successful man, there's a successful woman.
No, in front of every successful man.
Oh, in front.
So I followed my wife to Pensacola, and the first time I got in the airplane, I fell in love with it. And then I kind of bobbed and weaved. I had an instructor pilot who was a test pilot, and that gave me the motivation to go to test pilot school. I went and did that. And I watched Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon, and I was impressed, but not so impressed that was something I wanted to do. Even then, I had no desire to become an astronaut or to go to space. And it was meeting the late Dr. Ron McNair, who became my hero. Ron, like me, had grown up in the segregated South, but unlike me, Ron had always wanted to be an astronaut, and everything that he did in his life was focused on getting to go become a NASA astronaut. And this was long before astronauts were anything other than pilots and test pilots, as a matter of fact. He taught himself calculus and physics because his school in South Carolina didn't offer it. He went to a school called North Carolina A&T and got a degree in physics. And from that was recruited and went to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and earned a doctorate degree in laser physics, became one of the world's foremost laser physicists. Just in case he wasn't successful as a laser physicist, he became an extremely accomplished jazz saxophonist. So he could have been a professional jazz saxophonist if he wanted to. And he was a fifth degree black belt in karate. And so when, in his spare time, he became an astronaut. He applied to NASA and was selected in the first group of space shuttle astronauts. I met him sometime later when I was a test pilot, and he just happened to come back with some of his classmates in the first group of astronauts, and we talked the whole weekend. I was impressed with him, but not enough to get interested in the space program. And then he did what frequently makes people do things, embarrassment. He asked me if I was going to apply for the space program. I told him, not on your life. And he looked at me real strange. He said, why not? And I said, they never picked me. And then he told me, just looked at me, he said, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. He said, how do you know if you don't ask? So one of the things that I've tried to tell kids everywhere I've gone around the world is, how do you know if you don't ask? You've got to have the courage to ask, and you've got to study hard, you've got to work hard, and you cannot be afraid of failing. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be selected. I was afraid of failing. And so I put the artificial limitation on myself, and Ron embarrassed me. He kind of shook me into what my mom and dad had taught me growing up, that I could do anything. So I did apply the second time I got selected.
That is amazing. So the lesson here is that obviously if there is something that you think you're not going to be able to achieve, and you put that limitation on yourself, that's self-imposed.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
You've got to want it. You've got to want it. You've got to want it bad. And that's the work hard part. I mean, you've got to study. And science and math is required, but I tell young people all the time, you really need to broaden your base. You need to take languages. You need to, no matter where you come from, you should understand your own history and culture, and then try to learn as much as you can about other people. Because in the space program, it's an international endeavor. NASA doesn't do anything alone anymore. We have a little situation. But today, everything that NASA does, almost every single project we do is involves international collaboration or collaboration with universities and colleges around the world, or collaboration with private entities. So we do a lot of what we call public-private ventures. Elon Musk, who is a native of South Africa, Elon started a little rocket company, and he was not doing very well, and NASA offered an opportunity for somebody who could help us replace the space shuttle when we retired the shuttle. And Elon had a little company called SpaceX, and NASA had a contest, and we selected two companies. We said, we're going to give you $500 million, and that's it. Now that may sound like a lot of money. It really is. But in terms of building spacecraft, it's really not when you're talking about billion-dollar spacecraft. But that was the beginning of commercialization of space for us. Elon took one pot of money, another company called Orbital ATK took another pot, and they both took that as an investment in their companies and went off and started, he built the Falcon 9, his first attempt. When I talk about not being afraid of failure, Elon's first attempt at going to space was the Falcon 1. And it was an abysmal failure and almost bankrupted him, and he almost quit, almost went out of business. And then NASA offered the opportunity to do, the commercial cargo program, and he did, and has been incredibly successful, and has changed the whole face of space operations, launching anyway, because he's driven the cost down.
Did you ever think you'd see rockets self-land?
No. I mean, I saw it all the time growing up because I was a big science fiction buff. So I used to watch, people like, shucks. Let me think of my favorite astronaut in those days. It was Buck Rogers. And Buck Rogers would go walk to his spaceship like we go to a car or a bus. And he climbed in his spaceship, kind of put his spacesuit on like I put on my sport coat, and went to Mars and came back all in a day. So that's the way I grew up. Never believing any of it, but kind of hoping that one day humans would do that. And now we're on the verge of having, we won't go put on a spacesuit like we put on our sport coats. We won't walk out to our rocket, like we're going to our car. But we will have people, some of the young people in this room, in all probability, will be among the first people that will set foot on Mars.
Well, if not, they will certainly go into space because, we've done a couple of interviews. We've interviewed Virgin Galactic, and I know that Jeff Bezos and his company are also working on commercial space travel, which means that in less than a decade, you'll be able to buy a ticket to fly to space, just like you would to fly to space.
I can promise you that in less than a decade, if we can get the cost down, many of you will be able to go buy a ticket and go to space, and more than likely, what most of you will do will be a suborbital space flight, and means that if you go back and the kids don't have any idea who Alan Bean or John Glenn or Alan Shepard was, but Alan Shepard was the first American to go to space, and he did a suborbital flight. He just went up in a rocket and came back down, so it was like 20 or 30 minutes total time. Many of you will have an opportunity to do that with a company like Virgin Galactic, or you can fly with Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, or Amazon and the Washington Post and all that. You'll fly a suborbital space flight that'll for it, but you'll spend about 20 or 30 minutes in space, and you will have seen the planet from the vantage point that most people will never see in their lives. And I think your whole perspective on this planet will change having seen it from that vantage point. Some of you will not want to do that, by the way, and some of you will want to be flight controllers or flight directors. We have, for the first time in the history of NASA, we have a chief flight director now, Holly Ridings, who is a woman. It's taken us a long time. We're celebrating the 65th anniversary of NASA, but patience.
Wow. So now, I know we've got a lot of viewers in the States. We've got a couple of classrooms there, and we've also got some people over here. Before we give you a chance to ask a question, when you heard the news after you applied that you were going to space, that must have been some special moment. So tell us about that, and then what was your first flight like?
It was very special. I had done my interview. I had gone to Houston, Texas, and I had done my interview in February. And then I went back home, and I didn't hear a thing for months. NASA, because the process, NASA usually picks 200 finalists out of thousands of people that apply. And then they bring you to Houston in groups of 20. So there were 10 groups they had to interview, and I think I was in the second group. So there were a lot more people to interview after I left. I went to Houston for that week, and it was absolutely spectacular. I got an opportunity to meet all the astronauts and play softball with all the astronauts and do everything else that astronauts did. And I told my wife, that was the most incredible thing I've ever done. I don't stand a chance. I'll give you an example. One of my interview mates was a guy named Franklin Chang Diaz, who was born and raised in San Jose, Costa Rica. Franklin spoke broken English, and Franklin had decided when he was 7 that he was going to be an astronaut. And he told his father, who was an engineer who would travel all over the world, I need to go to the United States. His dad said, why? He said, because I want to be an astronaut. His father said, get real, go back to school and talk to me when you graduate from high school. And Franklin did, graduated from Lincoln High School in San Jose, Costa Rica, went to his dad and said, it's time for you to go. They said, go with it. It's the place I was going 10 years ago. It's time for me to go to the U.S. It's time to become an astronaut. His father finally gave him $50 in cash, a one-way ticket to a place called Hartford, Connecticut, and a note to an engineer friend of his that said, hey, this is my son, Franklin, that you've heard me talk about. Humor him for as long as you can, and when you grow weary, send him back and I'll reimburse you for the return. And Franklin came to the U.S. not speaking English, almost flunked out of the University of Connecticut, but taught himself English, graduated with honors from the University of Connecticut, went to MIT, same place that Ron did, earned a PhD in plasma physics. And today, Franklin is not only one of the world's foremost plasma physicists, but he is toiling away in Houston, Texas, even as we speak, on the final phases of testing of something that is called a Gossamer plasma fusion rocket engine. So when I talk to students about needing a new form of propulsion that will enable us to go to Mars in, say, 4 months instead of 8, or 39 days, as he believes can be done. I mean, this is from a kid that grew up in San Jose, Costa Rica. No one would have given him any chance of ever becoming an astronaut. And he's flown 7 times in space, more than, there are only 2 people who have flown that much, Franklin and another American by the name of Gary Ross. All 3 of us were in the same class. And Franklin and I flew our first flights together. We interviewed together. And then I flew my last flight to him. I went back home and I talked to my wife. I said, man, I met this guy Franklin saying, you guys, if I got to compete with him, I'm toast. There is no way in the world I'm going to be selected. So they called. I was a test pilot, and I was walking out to fly a test flight in an 87. And the phone rang in what we call the ready room. So I had my flight gear in my arms, and I was walking out, and somebody said, hey, Charlie, phone call from you from Houston. And who could be calling from Houston? And I essentially forgotten about my application. And it was a guy named Mr. George Abbey who, they had told us before we left, if you get a call from George Abbey, there's a chance that you were selected. If you get a call and it's not George Abbey, there is no chance. Binary, either you had good news or maybe good news and bad news. And so he asked a very simple question. He said, you still want to be an astronaut? I said, who is this again? And he said, it's George. And I said, do I need to be there tomorrow? I said, no. Don't say anything about it because we've got to notify everybody and then we've got to put the notice out to the public affairs people know this. We got to get the notice out to the media. So you can go home and tell your wife, but don't tell anybody else. And in a few days, you'll be able to share the news. So I was ready to go out to my airplane, and I had to go out to my airplane and fly. So
how do you fly knowing that
you scream in the cockpit, and you giggle and you're acting like a little kid? And it was a good thing. It was a test flight, but it was something called an accelerated service test. So it was really easy. You had a test card that told you what to do. And essentially on that flight, we were trying to figure out problems with an engine in that particular model airplane. So my job for an hour was just to take the throttle and go boom, 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 and try to get the engine to fail. And which you hope didn't happen, but that was the purpose of the test. Wow, I did loops and barrel rolls and stuff.
All right. Well, we're gonna switch to Diane. Let's go to Julie's class first. Julie, if you want to unmute yourself, and then maybe one of your students would like to ask a question, they can just come up to the camera. Hopefully, we can hear you. Sometimes it takes a while. While Julie's getting ready, Diane, do you have anyone in your class that would like to ask a question? Well, while they're getting themselves together, let's go to our live audience over here. Who would like to ask if I see a question? Coming up on the front, bike, friend. What kind of bike do you ride? Oh, a mountain bike. No, see, I'm on a street bike. I'm on a road bike. So I ride bike every day. I wake up, if I can't, I can do that. But the first thing I do now that I'm no longer fully employed, get on my bike and I ride something called Mountain Trail. It goes along the Potomac River from way down back to George Washington River, up there to Washington. So I ride for a couple hours every morning. That's where I start my day. I'm not going to ride on the road like you. Okay, so we're going to get your question and I'll keep Julie's class or ask question afterwards.
How long can you even expect to be an astronaut or do you have any?
I had no idea I was going to be an astronaut. Like I was saying, I had no desire to be an astronaut. Never dreamed of being an astronaut until I applied, and got the call that said, you know, come on down. Because like I said, you know, when I went home after my interview, I told my wife it was a great experience, but that was it. Let's go on with the rest of our lives. And several months later, I got the call saying that I had been selected. So he was shocked.
Okay. So Julie's class, I see you've got someone there, so you can unmute yourself now. Let's just see if they're able to click on the microphone.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. Okay.
Nothing else, okay?
How long were you in? What was your favorite?
You asked two things. How long?
There we go.
How long were you in space? And what was your favorite mission?
How long was I in space and what was my favorite mission? I tell people all the time, I was a camper. I flew only the space shuttle. So I flew 4 space shuttle missions, and my longest flight was 9 days. That was about as long as we could fly on the space shuttle. It was about 16 days. And that was, once we got the International Space Station up, we could dock to the International Space Station and we could get water and electricity and things from the station so we could stay for longer periods of time. And we actually, we could park the shuttle with the space station for weeks, you know, if not months at a time.
You could park, but you never got to visit.
But we didn't have an International Space Station.
Okay.
My last flight in space was the first joint Russian-American shuttle mission. And when you ask me, I don't have a favorite of the 4, but the one that I cherish the most, let me put it that way, is my last flight for a lot of different reasons. One, I knew it was going to be my last flight. So I'm a very emotional person, if you can't tell. And so we were talking about it at dinner last night. You know, every single evolution over the year that we were training for my flight, I knew was the last time. Think about it when you've done something for the last time. And every time my crew knew it was my last flight, my family knew it was my last flight, the most important person, I knew it was my last flight. Everything I did was the final time I was going to do that for a year. So it was a very tough flight for me, but the part that made it very special was we had actually moved 2 Russian cosmonauts and their families, and about 200 or so Russian flight controllers, medical personnel, and everybody to Houston, Texas from Moscow, because we wanted to see if we could work cooperatively as a team, because we were astronauts to the Mir space station, which was the old Soviet space station. And we were envisioning at the time, we didn't have an International Space Station, but we had already started planning for a space station. So ours was the test flight to see if Russians and Americans could work cooperatively in space, and it was a rousing success. And we all made friends. My kids got to know Sergei and Vladimir's family and friends, and so we have all now been friends for more than 20 years because that our flight took place in 1994, and we have not been out of touch since that time. And Vladimir Titov was a colonel in the Russian Air Force. He eventually went to work for Bolden, for the American company Boeing, as a vice president in Moscow. Sergei Krikalev, who flew with us, now runs the human spaceflight program for the Russian Space Agency for its cosmonauts. And so, you know, when we talk about the relationship between Russia and the United States, it's totally different in space and the space agencies than it is in government and politics, because ours is personal. Almost all of us have either lived and worked with them or we've trained with them. So it's kind of like a family thing when you talk about that. So hopefully that answered both questions.
Atalo, do any of your students want to attempt in English? I see a finger up. That's a good sign. How's your Portuguese?
Yeah.
Try me. It's non-existent.
Do you understand? Sure.
You're going to have to repeat.
Do you understand Portuguese?
No, I don't.
No.
Unfortunately.
But we don't open
I do know obrigado, that's all.
So he's getting some extra.
So let me see if I got it right. You never worked in the International Space Station, right?
I never worked in the International Space Station, no. Right.
So your longest mission was 90 days. And
My
where?
last mission was 1994 aboard the space shuttle.
Ah, space shuttle. Very good. Okay, we have one question for you.
How are you?
How old, how old were you when you started working at NASA?
So
Oh,
how
how long
old
did I
were you
work?
when you
Yeah.
first started working at NASA?
When I started, I was, as I said, I spent 34 years in the Marine Corps, and so I was on loan to NASA for 14 years in the middle of my Marine Corps career, and I went there at the age of 34. So I was a young Marine Corps test pilot who was 34 years old, and that's about the age of most pilots, test pilots, when they go. Today, a lot of the scientists who go, particularly the young ones, have gotten a doctorate degree and spent 3 years or so in industry or somewhere. So they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And some people are, like my first roommate was 66 when he flew his first flight in space. So the age range is all over the place. But I was 34 when I went, and I was 39 when I flew my first flight in 1986. And when I left 14 years after going, I flew my last flight at, what does that make it? 48? Close.
Don't look a day older than 30.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So I mean, that's the one thing that obviously taking part in something like NASA, nothing happens in a hurry.
No.
It's a long process. Things happen, planning is 10 to 15 years in advance. Isn't that a little frustrating? Because now you're running this agency.
Everybody is a type A. You know, almost everybody who becomes an astronaut is one of these high-strung people anyway. You're success-oriented, and you think you're the best in the world, and you should always be first to do anything. And so it's not frustrating as much as it is. You're just kind of chomping at the bit to get an opportunity to go. For me, I learned to be a lot more patient because the shuttle was supposed to have flown its first flight in 1978. And I was selected for NASA, by NASA in 1980, and we didn't fly the first flight on the shuttle until 1981. So we were still working to get it ready to fly 3 years after it was supposed to have flown, and almost 2 years after I got there. So there was a little frustration that we couldn't move faster, but you learned very quickly that what you were doing was very risky, and so you didn't want to do anything until you were certain. We had some fits and starts and everything, and so I ended up flying 6 years after I got there. But one thing, I was really ready to fly when I did. I was hungry to fly, and I had an incredible crew. So my first flight went really well.
Wow. Any questions? I see a whole bunch of hands. So we'll go down this way. So starting over there.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Jonathan.
Jonathan? Got it.
Did you by any chance meet any aliens out there?
Aha! No! Maybe, Jonathan has a question that lots of people want to know. But I'm glad you sort of glad to ask that way. People frequently ask, have you ever seen a UFO? And I tell people all the time, I've seen UFOs when I'm flying airplanes and UFOs in space, particularly because a UFO is an unidentified flying object. And you always saw things floating around the shuttle. 99% of the time it was ice that had broken off the back of the shuttle. When the shuttle's sitting on the launch pad, when they fuel it on launch day, it's incredibly cold. Liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen that are going in as a propellant in the vehicle. And the Kennedy Space Center it's like 100% humidity all the time. So a lot of moisture in the air just freezes on what we call the aft bulkhead of the shuttle where the main engine's doing. So you get a whole sheet of ice that could be six inches thick on the back of the shuttle at liftoff. And when you get to space, it doesn't melt because there's this process called sublimation. It goes all the way from solid to gas without passing through the liquid state. And it takes several days for it to sublimate enough that it will all fall off. And while it's doing that, little peak, it's like a glacier that's suffering from climate change and pieces break off. That's essentially what happens on the backside of the space terrifying, and I never saw any evidence. Now, let me answer a question you did ask. Do I believe that there's life elsewhere in the universe? Yes, I do. And I think most scientists hope that there is. And most of us hope that, we'll find initially just microbes, something that because we have great expectations for finding something like microbes on Mars, because we've already learned in the laboratory that we can make building materials, like we make concrete using a certain kind of microbe, and the microbes eat stuff and they're excrement like what we do when we get rid of waste. The microbes excrement, some of them, it's like glue stuff. And we can use that as lunar soil or Martian effluent or Martian cement. And we can actually make bricks. We call them bio bricks. And they're very strong, so we can use it as building material. So yes, we are hoping we find signs of life and eventually maybe even intelligent life. But we don't have anything right now that says that it exists, unfortunately.
We did have a request that when you speak, maybe also, well, just look this way so that they can hear it.
I'm sorry.
A little more of the conversation.
Okay, I got you. I apologize.
The next question over here.
How does it feel when you take off?
Oh, how does it feel when you take off? Nothing at all like you think. People who go to a shuttle launch or go to a rocket launch today, they hear the countdown, and then all of a sudden, because of the speed of sound, sound travels at about, roughly 700 miles an hour. What does that work out to?
330 meters a second.
Yeah, a second. So, okay. It takes a while for that sound to get to the ears of people who are usually kilometers away from the launch. So they see this fire, and then they see this, and then all of a sudden they hear this, and it's like something just exploded. And so inside, you hear all that, and it's not at all violent like you think it's going to be, but the vibration is unbelievable. I mean, my experience is only with the space shuttle, but in the shuttle, when it lifted off, I mean, it was like, and it just shook you, and you could hear everything in it shaking and rattling and stuff, and it was like that for the first 2 minutes, as long as the solid rocket boosters were on the side. And then once the solids separated, after 2 minutes, it got really smooth. So it felt like you were in the biggest limousine on the smoothest highway you've ever been on. I mean, it was like you could tell you were still going to space, but you didn't have a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of G forces. It's about a G&a half at liftoff, which is nothing. You experience more than that starting out from some of these young men who are driving. You get more than that when you start off from a stop sign or a red light, driving around, Cape Town. And even the worst feeling in terms of force or G is when you return to Earth. And in the shuttle, so it was built to be very gentle. It was very maneuverable, but the most you felt was about 2 times the force of gravity, 2 Gs, when you were coming back to land. When you come back on a Russian Soyuz, it's about a 3 or 4 G entry. And if you do like the person crew did about a month ago when they had an aborted takeoff, they separated from the rocket and came back on what we call a ballistic entry. They were 9 G entry for the time that they were coming down. But it's kind of through here because of the way you're oriented in the capsule. So that's a lot different than this way. This way kind of blacks you out. This way you just have a hard time breathing. Take your pick. Jake, you have a question?
What do you think what time do you think that it's like to land on Mars?
Mars? When do you think you will land on humans? The question was, how soon do I think humans will land on Mars? If NASA and our international partners stay on the trajectory we're on right now, I think some of you will stand a chance of being among the crews that go to Mars in the 2030s. So less than 20 years from today, good chance. We've been putting things on Mars for 50 years now. Number of rovers, a number of orbiters, a number of landers. We have another lander called InSight that's going to go on the 26th of this month. InSight will be unlike anything we've put there before because it's actually going to use its little robotic arms to put sensors out on the surface of Mars. Some will listen for vibrations in the Martian surface, so like Mars quakes, if you want to call them that. Another thing is going to probe, it's going to drill down into the Martian surface several meters and bring up a sample of soil that one of these days we'll be able to return, either because humans will get it or we'll figure out a way to robotically retrieve it. So a lot of things are going on. In 2020, we have another Curiosity-like rover that's going to land on Mars, and that one will have an experiment that's called MOXIE. And I apologize, I hate acronyms, and so I generally don't remember what they are. But MOXIE is going to take samples of carbon dioxide out of the Martian atmosphere and use a chemical process to dissociate it, to separate it out into oxygen for breathing and fuel for a rocket, and then carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide or other kinds of constituents. But we're actually going to make breathable oxygen when we in 2020 when we fly the Mars 2020 rover.
Sure. Okay, we've got Sean. Before we get to Sean, I know, Julie, if you want to set someone up to ask a question. So we're just going to take one here in Cape Town and we'll come back to you. But before Sean asks his question, we've got a question tweeted in from astronaut Hayden. Now, he's not really an astronaut. He's a young kid with autism, but he is very, very excited about space. And his question to you, and I know he can't be here at the moment because he's got a meeting at one of the embassies, but he will be watching this afterwards. During your time in space, what was it like to fly over or through an aurora?
Oh, fascinating. And you actually, because my space shuttle missions were all, my lowest mission was like 400 kilometers, where the International Space Station is today. And that's a little bit higher than the aurora goes. Aurora are generally up to about the atmosphere, the edge of the atmosphere. So that's 70 kilometers or something like that. Whatever 50 miles is. My mathematician back there will help me out. 76 kilometers. So, you get above that and you don't have an aurora because there's no air. An aurora is really simply, it's charged particles in the atmosphere. Charged particles come in from the sun, from other planets, from places in the galaxy that we don't even know about, and they bombard our atmosphere in two places. They bombard our atmosphere everywhere, but the only place where they get down into the atmosphere is at the poles. And for those of you, the younger ones of you, haven't seen this in school yet, I don't think, but when you get to junior high and high school, your teacher, if they're really fun, the fun science teachers, will take either a piece of glass, or they'll take a piece of paper, and they'll drop metal filings on it with a bar magnet underneath. And what you'll see is those metal filings will, because of the magnet, they'll just break out in two big, a front and a backward C. And that's the way our magnetosphere is. It's a shell around Earth that protects us. And it's almost impenetrable. It keeps dangerous radiation out, except for two places, and it's weak at the poles. So that's why you see generally aurora at either the north or the south pole, is because that's where they're able to get into the upper regions of the atmosphere. But it is absolutely spectacular to fly over it. It actually seems, what's his name again?
Hayden.
Hayden, you actually seem like you're flying through them because you can look out at Earth's horizon. You're flying around Earth once every 90 minutes. So you're moving about 4 to 5 miles a second over Earth's surface. And it looks like you're going to fly right through the aurora as you approach them, but you're really over. But it's absolutely breathtaking because it's swirling beneath you and it's just constantly moving because it's just energy. It's causing light to be given off in all kinds of beautiful colors from the atmosphere.
Is it as spectacular to see it from space as it is from Earth?
I think it's more spectacular to see it from space because from Earth, you don't get to see the motion of the aurora the way you do from space. From space, you're looking at the North Pole, the whole polar region when you come over or come around. And so it's just breathtaking because you're getting a panoramic view. Whereas, if you're in Alaska or you're somewhere down south, you're looking at this one little section and it's just kind of sitting there.
We're going to come back to astrophotography in a second. Sean is a big enthusiast with regards to space. Yes.
I already flew on the shuttle Discovery.
Twice.
We did twice.
Yeah.
I was just part of the question. I was going to ask what the other shuttle.
I flew on, my first flight was on Columbia, which ironically was the same name of my birthplace. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. And as all South Carolinians will want to do, they actually thought we had named the shuttle for Columbia, South Carolina. We did not. It was named for an old sailing ship. Spacecraft are usually named like they're named for ships, for exploration vessels. And so we had Columbia, Atlantis, Discovery, Endeavor, Enterprise, Challenger. So I flew my first flight on Columbia, my second and final on Discovery, and my third on Atlantis.
Were they exactly the same? Were there slight differences between them?
Because they're built by human beings, and we always were looking for ways to improve them. Columbia was the heaviest vehicle that I ever flew on because it was the first actually built to fly in space, and it was beefy. I mean, the structure was overbuilt because we just wanted to make sure that it would be strong enough. After Columbia, we built Challenger, and Challenger was a little bit lighter because we'd taken some structure out and stuff like that. And then I think we did Discovery, and Discovery was even a little bit lighter. And then we built Atlantis, which was a little bit lighter, except we think we overdid it with Atlantis, so we put a little bit of structure back into Endeavor. So we had 5 different vehicles, plus Enterprise was the one that was named for Star Trek. It wasn't named for us. Well, I guess it was named for an exploration vessel. But Enterprise is the one that never went to space, but we would have never gone to space had it not been for what we call the approach and landing test that we did off the back of the 747. Enterprise flew the 3 ALT approach and landing tests to demonstrate to us that, yeah, we could take this brick, this thing that had almost no flying qualities, and we could fly it like a glider and bring it back to Earth and land it on a runway. So, but I flew 3 of the 6 shuttles that we built.
I have it on good authority that a shuttle is not like an airplane that you can glide. It's like a falling brick.
It is. We use the term lift to drag ratio, L/D, and a normal airplane has a lift to drag ratio of about 12-to-1, which means if the engines fail and everything, it'll go 12 miles for every mile that it's up in the air. So, or every 1,500 kilometers, it'll go 18 kilometers. Okay, so wow, yeah. So, but the shuttle is at about 3-to-1, which meant that, and in fact, the reason, if you look at a shuttle come back to Earth, when we came back to land, like the Kennedy Space Center, people would hear us before they saw us because they get these 2 sonic booms, because the shuttle had a delta wing, which meant it came back like this, but it was a double delta coming off the fuselage. It was like this, and then it went like that. So you got the sonic wave, the acoustic wave came off the back of the wing in 2 different phases, 2 different sounds. So you got when you came in, and people would look up because we were like, 10 miles up in the air over the landing field. Because when you came down, you were falling at like, I want to say 15,000 feet per second. That's so awesome. You're just falling like a brick, and you bank and you circle down, and it looks like a corkscrew. So you fly just this circling approach, and you only go around once in about a half a turn or 3/4 of a turn, and you're on the runway. So you go from 22,000 miles an hour to 22,000 kilometers an hour to 0 in roughly 3-4 minutes, and you're on the runway. You touch down at a little bit more than 200 kilometers an hour.
All right, we're going to go back to Julie's class. Do you guys have any more questions?
They
are ready.
All right.
What was it like in space?
You're going to have to repeat that?
It's nice and light.
What was the food like in space?
Oh, what was the food like in space? Oh, my food was absolutely delicious. Unlike the earlier days of Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, where they used to eat out of tubes. So it looked sort of like a toothpaste tube, and they said it was horrible. But we worked on the shuttle era and today, Astronauts work with the nutritionist and the dietitians months before you fly, and you sample all the foods that come out of the food laboratory. Meats are usually like meats, so you pick steak, fish, pork, whatever you like, and they prepare it the way you like it, and then they put it in a foil wrapper that's sealed, hermetically sealed, and then irradiated to keep bacteria down, because they leave gravy in it and everything. And so it gets stored. When you get ready to eat it, you put it in a food warmer, take a pair of scissors and open it up. And because of Sir Isaac Newton, how many of you know who Sir Isaac Newton was? What did Sir Isaac Newton give us? Yes, and what else did he say about motion? Who remembers? Dun, 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 dun. Oh, dun, dun, dun. You got your hand up, you know? How about his laws of motion? A body at what? Well, no. How about a body at rest does what? Stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion. One of the things about flying in space that is absolutely fascinating is you get to see science in action. You know, when you study and you read about Sir Isaac Newton and these laws of motion, you have to imagine what that means. When you get in space where gravity is overcome because you're going so fast that centrifugal force is created that opposes gravity, and you're caught in the middle. So you float. That's what it looks like. You're really trying to fall back to Earth constantly, and gravity won't let you. But when you open up your food, and I love rice, I love greens, all kinds of vegetables. Meat's my favorite, you know, shrimp cocktail, well, fish. Desserts were great. I loved strawberries. And you didn't have fresh strawberries, but you had strawberries that everything had been dehydrated. So they prepare it and then take all the fluid out. When you get ready to eat it, you put about 2 or 3 ounces back in and let it sit for about 20 minutes and it reconstitutes. And then you use a fork, knife, spoon and eat it. Because of Sir Isaac Newton's law that says a body at rest, I could pull the top off my food and hold it in the palm of my hand and very gently remove my hand and float over here to get whatever I was going to drink with it and float back, and we would still be sitting there. And then I'd gently grab it again. And I like using a spoon because with a spoon, you can take food and kind of smoosh it up against the side of your container so that it stays stuck to the spoon and then you eat. Some people were industrious and used the fork, but you always ran a risk with a fork of having stuff go all over the place. So. But it was great food, to answer the question.
There's a tough question. Obviously, going into space, things are not as you would have if you were on Earth. Showering, going to the toilets. You want to maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
No shower. Yes, toilet. Toilet works just like it works down here on Earth with some minor modifications because you don't have gravity, you know, to help you in space. You have to create it or some substitute. So we put a little fan in the bottom of the waste management system when you sit down, and we recommend everybody sit down. You don't have to because there's a urine collection hose. So we separate the solid waste from the liquid waste. The urine goes down through. She just went, oh man.
If you're going to be an astronaut,
are we really talking about poop and pee? Yes, we are, and it becomes very important. I'm going to tell you why. But so it's separated. The urine goes into a urine tank, a wastewater tank. The solid matter, the fecal matter, goes into the canister that is your commode at home. And as a general rule, it goes into a waste basket or bag. And so when we come back on the space station, when the crew does their routine cleanup, they take the bags and they put them into a spacecraft that's coming back to Earth that's going to burn up. So the waste gets burned up during reentry. But the urine, anything that's liquid now, we collect and we recycle. So urine, perspiration, when we exercise on board, the filters catch all the condensate and it all gets put into a water recycling system. It gets cleaned up just like we do in the waste management system here in Cape Town. And by the time it comes out, it's clean drinking water and we reuse it. And the reason we do that is because when you go to Mars, you know, 8 months away, you can't have a cargo vessel that brings you water every 6 months or something like that. So you need to make it, you know, take whatever you need and then make it as you go. And that's why I said before, you know, we're going to take oxygen out of the carbon dioxide on Mars and we'll get hydrogen from somewhere else. And we'll put them together and we'll make water and electricity, by the way. because that's the way you make, on the space shuttle, we use fuel cells, and they used hydrogen and oxygen to make electricity, but the main major byproduct was a lot of water. So, but we don't do that on the International Space Station, but I think we'll do it on Mars.
Let's take one step forward. Where is NASA heading? Because you guys were planning for the past 10 years.
No longer than that.
For the past 20, 30 years, where you were heading. So what is the actual plan? Was it always going to be just Mars, or now is it the moon and then Mars?
NASA and our international partners. And I always have to include the international partners because NASA doesn't do anything by itself anymore. That day is long gone. So everything that we do, whether it's satellites or studies or people, it is usually what we call either a public-private partnership where we work with some private company like SpaceX, or it's with academia. So the mission that went to Pluto, Juno that went to Mars, to Jupiter, those missions are primarily done by universities, either in the United States or somewhere else, with NASA being their major partner. But the science team is generally academicians and students and the like, and that's their life's work. So we do those kinds of things. We have always been going, since humans started thinking about the heavens, people have always had this dream of going to Mars. So Mars has always sort of been, we didn't know why, but we just knew that Mars was attractive. We had this vision that we would find Martians and all this kind of stuff. So humans have always wanted to go there. Werner von Braun, who was the father of the Saturn program, he got us to the moon with the Saturn V. Before we even launched to the moon, Werner von Braun had already finished his architecture for the Mars architecture. So he had already planned how we were going to get to Mars once we successfully landed on the moon. The thing that goes back and forth is, do you go to the moon first, go back there again before you go to Mars? And it's not that big a deal. You don't have to, but there is much to be gained by doing it. And where we are right now is we believe we've got some international partners who really don't have any interest in going to Mars because they don't feel that they're going to be technologically advanced enough to participate. So that's not of interest to them. Going to the moon is. They can see themselves putting landers there. They can see themselves putting telescopes on the moon or communications things, getting water, getting rare minerals from the surface of the moon through a process we call in situ resource utilization, which is finding things that are on another body and mining them or doing some other way to bring them back to Earth or use them. But NASA's focused with its international partners on eventually getting humans to Mars.
So Mars is definitely...
Oh yeah, it's still there. You'll find that in the decade of the 20s, we'll be doing almost all lunar orbit operations and every once in a while taking a foray down to the surface. Our hope is that other countries or private enterprises will design landers that allow humans to go to the surface of the moon, and then NASA continues to spend the bulk of its money and that of our partners on the journey to Mars.
If you could think back to your career in NASA, being the director, do you kind of have any regrets that they never discovered life while you were there?
No, I'm not a person that would it have been awesome to have done that? Yes, I am a person who lives a life of no regrets, and I advise all the young people here: don't, if you failed at something, who cares? To be quite honest, go back and try it again, and until you're successful, and don't ever regret a day in your life. If there's something you didn't get to do, it may be okay. It may be okay to wish you had done it, but I wouldn't dwell on it because. The big thing for me is I have 3 of the most beautiful granddaughters in the world, and I wouldn't touch that, and I think if I did anything differently, who knows where I'd be today, and I'm not ready for that. I like my life the way it is, so I've never regretted anything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Question over here.
Yeah. Interesting. The question for those on the call, the young lady's asking any discussion of, yes, you are. You're younger than I am. Any discussion of colonizing or doing stuff. A lot of people talk about colonizing Mars and colonizing the moon. Elon Musk, for example, his vision is dying on Mars. I tell people I want to go to Mars. I do not want to die on Mars. I want to die back here at home whenever that happens. Some people talk about colonizing. In my mind, I mean, realistically, being honest with people, we are a long, long way from colonizing any place. And one of the things that I have become more conscious of as I get older is being misguided in talking about colonizing other places in the solar system or in the universe, because a lot of people now have given up on Earth and want to use Mars or the moon or something as an alternative to Earth. That is a dumb idea. I mean, you know, we live on the most phenomenal planet that we know of. We live on the only planet that we are absolutely certain can sustain life. Now, there are a lot of people like me who believe we can sustain life in other places, but it is not, you are not going to go on Mars or the moon and get out and walk around in a shirt like this. You're going to be in a spacesuit, otherwise you're going to die, because it's just not, they don't have the atmosphere. Mars has no magnetosphere anymore to protect it. So human beings living on Mars are going to have to deal with increased radiation. We'll live underground, I think, and you'll come up to the surface when you need to, you know, to do things. I personally don't visualize, when I think of colonization, I think of like, you know, the Europeans came and landed on the east coast of the United States and just kept moving west until there was no more land to move to, and then started going across the Pacific. I don't see that happening on the surface of Mars. I think we'll get there and we'll find a man. This is a harsh place. We can live here for long periods of time, like we do on Antarctica. You know, we send people who live in Antarctica, on Antarctica for years at a time, but nobody goes down there and stays for the rest of their life. And we have very seldom had anybody die on Antarctica. And if there are people who aren't willing to die in foreign places here on Earth, why in the world would I want to send somebody to Mars? So I'm not enamored with colonization, because colonization implies permanently as a place other than Earth, and I'm happy with Earth. I just think we ought to protect it. We ought to take care of it. That's what we need to focus on.
We're going to take one last question from Atalo, one last one from Judy. So Atalo, have you got one?
I see one.
He's got the finger.
Are you unmuted?
Yep, they're just picking.
Okay, we have a question.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm fine. How about you?
Doing very well, thank you.
That's great. So, if you could your brain for future generations, would you?
If I were offered an opportunity for a future mission, would I go?
And your brain for future generations, would you?
I didn't quite. Can you say it one more time?
One more time, if you could copy.
If you could copy your brain for future generations, would you?
Oh, if somebody wanted to collect my brain and save it for future. Well, and I'm gonna be very blunt, very honest in this regard. If you look at my driver's license from the state of Virginia, I'm not sure about other countries, but in the United States, if you want to donate your body for science, then you tell people you want to do it, and you have a little notation on your driver's license in case, you know, you're in an automobile accident or on my bicycle and I go off a bridge or something. They take my driver's license out and they say, okay, this guy has volunteered to have his body used for medical science. So yeah, I've told my family, you know, use me for something that's for the good of humanity. You know, if anybody thinks they can get anything out of my brain, you know, they can have that. I'm not sure what you get with this.
I offered my body to science, but they're still contesting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And now we're going to go to Judy.
And I said that I'll put in what I didn't say it precisely, but I put in a pitch for organ donors. You know, we got at least one doctor in here, and I'm certain that I don't know whether he agrees or not, but I think it's really important for people to, you know, to sign up to be organ donors. Like, you can tell them whether you want your eyes or your limbs or stuff, but I'm just a you know, I've told my family I want to be, when I die, I want to be all over the world. and there are two ways for me to do that: cremate me and spread my ashes in any body of water, and eventually I'll end up all over the world because there's only one ocean. That's one of the things you realize when you go to space. We call different sections of the ocean different names, but there's one ocean on which we live, and there are these bodies of land that kind of poke up through it periodically that we call continents or islands and stuff. So we're a lot more alike than we think we are, and we have very few differences, far less differences than we think we do. And you know, the sooner we realize that, the better off we're going to be.
Sure. All right. And Julie, you got a question over there?
You have to be nice and loud.
How come you decided to be an astronaut in those?
Why did I decide to do what about an astronaut?
Why did you decide to become an astronaut?
Oh, why did I decide to become an astronaut?
You didn't want to be one?
No, I did not want to be one. I was embarrassed into applying for the space program by my late, very good friend, my role model and mentor, Dr. Ron McNair, who inspired me and embarrassed me when he asked me if I was going to be an astronaut, and I told him no, because I didn't think they'd pick me. And he reminded me very quickly that I was chickening out, that I was accepting failure that I didn't need to accept. I didn't want to be told no, and so the easy way was not to ask. And so again, I will give you all this message one more time. If there's something you want, how old are you? Okay, you're going to be around for another 100 and who knows how many years. If there's something you want in those 100 and some odd years, ask for it. Because if you don't, nobody's going to walk up to you on the street and say, hey, how would you like to go to Mars? It ain't going to happen. So if you want to go, you need to step up and go find out, where do I sign up, and say I want to go. How much do I have to train? How much am I prepared now? If I'm not, what do I need to do to get prepared? And, you know, we've had people who apply to be astronauts. I have one friend who applied 11 times. And you think about it, when we don't even look for astronauts other than every 2 or 3 years, think about how long it took this guy, and now he's flown on the International Space Station several times, but he applied for over a period of 20 some odd years. Wow, before he was finally set up.
That is the most. I mean, I know Don Thomas did. Yeah. He was turned down 4 times before he chose to do it.
We've had people apply
11 times.
Yep. That's what I call persistence.
Wow. Persistence breaks the resistance.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Well, I know that we've run out of time. So for those of you that joined us for the live broadcast, thank you so much. We are going to stop the broadcast over here. Those of you that are still in the